one of the premier journals in the field of aging. His work has also been exhibited at the Museum of International Folk Art, the New Orleans Museum of Art, the Fowler Museum, and the Carnegie Museum of Pittsburgh, among other sites. As a travel photojournalist, he's published more than 300 features. As a sports photojournalist, he's been photographing older athletes in both national and international competitions since 2007. Prior to his career as photojournalist, which I always thought was his lifelong career, he was a partner in the management consulting division of an international professional services firm. I welcome you to tonight's presentation, and I think a very enchanting evening. Ron, take it away.
Well, thank you so much. It's a delight being here to share with you my photographs of older athletes, but more importantly, to share with you some of their stories. Because it is the stories behind the pictures that I think move us and allow us to see what is possible for older adults to do. So I'm going to talk about what I call the master sports movement. It is a movement. It is growing. There are more and more people participating in master sports, and the outside world is finally getting a little bit interested in it. And I'm going to talk about the master sports movement from 4 perspectives. What are master sports? What sports are available for older adults to participate in on a national and international basis? Why are master sports important? Who are some of the people who participate in master sports? How did they get there? What are their motivations? And what is the future of master sports? Now, the types of sports that are available for older adults, one of the ones that I'm very intimately involved with is track and field. I am the official photographer for the United States Track and Field Masters Association. And there are about 10,000 older athletes in the US from the ages of 35 to 100 plus who regularly compete in masters track and field. The first international competition was in 1975 in Toronto. There were 1,800 athletes participating in that. The most recent international competition was just a couple of months ago in Malaga, Spain, and there were over 8,000 athletes from around the world competing in that. And one of the people who did extraordinarily well is this gentleman, Charles Ali, from the US. Charles is arguably the fastest man in the world over the age of 70. That's a big distinction. He won the 100 meters, the 200 meters, and the 400 meters in Malaga. And he was named Masters Athlete of the Year for the entire world in 2013. And there's a possibility he will get that same honor this year based on his achievements in Malaga. Another area of master sports is swimming. In 1970, there was the first U.S. national swimming meet held in Amarillo, Texas. There were only 46 people participating in that. Nowadays, there are hundreds whenever they have a national meet. The first international championship was in Tokyo in 1986. And Joan here, she was a competitive swimmer in her teen years in Australia. Didn't do much in her middle years, but then when she hit 84, she got back in the pool. And within a few years, she held 21 age-related records in Australia. A particularly beautiful sport, I think, for masters athletes is diving. It became organized on a national basis in the States, and it started in 1974. Lois here, she's from Canada. She represented Canada in the 1954 Commonwealth Games, and she continues to dive to this day. She's now 86. When you see the age of somebody, it is the age they were when I took the picture, because I've been doing this for about a dozen years. So some people They're frozen in time here. So Lois is 86 now, but she continues to dive, and she also continues to work as a stunt woman in Hollywood, because I guess older actresses don't like throwing themselves through the air like that. Another interesting sport for masters is weightlifting, both for men and for women. We all know the positive gains you get from bone density. For weightlifting, this is Mohammed Gad of Iran competing in 2015 at the World Masters Games in Turin, Italy. And he won the gold medal in his age group. And here he is with his family who came from Iran to cheer him on. The World Masters Games are held every 4 years and are very similar to the Olympics. They have about 28 different sports, including track and field, but they have other sports as well. The most recent World Masters Games was last year in Auckland, New Zealand. There were 28 sports and 28,000 competitors. Now you compare that to the Olympics, and the Olympics have generally between 11,000 and 12,000 competitors. So the World Masters Games for older adults is much, much larger than the Olympics. And some of the sports that are contested include basketball, volleyball, soccer, bicycling, and even archery. And just as the Summer Olympics has a winter counterpart, so too do the World Masters Games have a winter Masters Games. This has been held twice only, 2010 in Bled, Slovenia, and 2015 in Quebec City, Canada, which I photographed. There were 9 sports and 1,500 competitors, including curling, figure skating for older people, beautiful, speed skating, and snowshoeing. And a particularly arduous event, the triathlon, in which you have to snowshoe for 5 kilometers, then you speed skate for 11 kilometers, and then you do cross-country skiing for 9 kilometers. And the star of the Quebec Winter Masters Games was Gerard de Boer of the Netherlands. He won 7 gold medals in speed skating, including the 25-kilometer marathon and the 50-kilometer marathon. So what are some of the defining characteristics of masters sports? The competitions are held by age groups of about 5 years. The young athletes are not competing against the older athletes. So it is completely possible in a single championship to have the world champion in high jump. Here, Carl Hawk from the USA. He's in the age group 40 to 44. The same time, the same meet in Lahti, Finland. Bruce McBarnett, also of the USA, won the world championship in the age group 50 to 54. And at the same time, Leland McPhee was the world record holder in the age group 95 to 99. Another defining characteristic of master sports now is that they're international in scope. They used to just be national, but now most of the sports are organized on an international basis. So these world championships that I just got back from, this is a championship from 2009 in Lahti, Finland. Very common to see a man from India competing against a man from the Czech Republic, both of whom were beaten by a man from Sweden with one shoe off. And I didn't know, did his shoe fall off when he jumped? No. Some high jumpers, especially the ones who do the straddle like this, believe that if you take one shoe off, it creates a height differential, which gives you a competitive advantage. I don't know whether it's true, but obviously Mr. Pepper believes it's true, and he did win. And similarly, nowadays, since we are way past Title IX, all the events that are available for men are also available to women. So, in Lahti, Finland, you had Nora Putti from Estonia. Nora is still competing. She's in her late 90s now. She was competing against Ilse Pfluger from Germany, who won. Now let's move on to talking about why master sports are important. And I'm going to talk about this from 3 points of view. One, they embody a particular definition of successful aging. They defy aging stereotypes, and they also provide fitness role models. So let's look at the first. We were just talking before the presentation about this book, Successful Aging. All of you in the gerontology field know about this book. Written by John Rowe and Robert Kahn, who led the MacArthur Foundation study on aging. Now, I am not a gerontologist, but I know a lot of gerontologists. And they all recommended to me to read this book and think about it in terms of master sports. And one of the things that Rowe and Kahn talk about in their definition of successful aging are these 3 factors: low risk of disease and disease-related disability, high mental and physical function, and active engagement with life. So let's look at master sports in terms of this particular definition of successful aging. I know there are many different definitions, but focus on this one. This is Bob Ward. When I photographed Bob, he was 76, and he looks 46. Okay? Bob is the former strength coach for the Dallas Cowboys. That's why he looks like this. And he told me a very interesting thing. He said that exercise in service of a sport is so much more psychologically reinforcing than just exercise for general fitness. And what he meant by this was that if you are engaged in a sport like track and field, where you can measure how fast you run, how high you jump, how far you throw, when you see yourself increasing, you are more likely to continue that exercise program which led to those improved results. And that's a very smart thing to say, because we all know how at the beginning of the year we very religiously go to the gym with all sorts of good intentions, and then those intentions kind of dissolve. If you're involved in a sport like Masters Track, I know a lot of people, and a couple of them are going to be here tonight, but I think the weather helped them back, and they would tell me that they train every day, and they train to increase what they are competing in. One of the other aspects of the definition of successful aging was high mental and physical function. Earl Fee is a poster child for this. Earl not only holds world records in a number of age groups in the middle distance runs, he also is a retired nuclear engineer and a published poet. Similarly, Giuseppe Ottaviani, he was the oldest competitor in Malaga a couple of months ago, 102. But he doesn't just do long jumping. He is also a professor at the University of Urbino in Italy, and he continues to lecture on biomechanics. And Kay Glenn, she's just your average grandmother of 6 who does this.
Wow.
One of the other components of the MacArthur Foundation's definition of successful aging was active engagement in life, which included relating to others. I show you this picture mainly because when you think of athletics with younger people, there is a lot of psyching out one's opponents, trying to get a mental advantage. While Masters athletes are definitely competitive, they are very collegial. Many of these people have been competing against one another for decades. They are friends. They know each other for many, many years. And so when you go to one of these world championships, it's like going to a high school reunion, because these people see one another every 2 to 4 years, and they enjoy competing against one another. These 3 women from Australia, I photographed them in Sydney, and at the Sydney World Masters Games in 2009, and their combined ages it's 280 years. All really pushing. And they have been competing against one another for decades. And in fact, I heard the one on the right, who was the gold medal winner, go over to the other two and apologize to them for beating them. So. And these gentlemen, they have a very special relationship. They are the very first relay team over the age of 90. And in 2015, they set a number of world records. They were competing at national meets in the States, but those results were good enough to establish world records in a number of relay distances. And sometimes people take relating well to others beyond friendship. We have a number of people who have met their partners through Masters Athletics. Crystal Donnelly, who's USATF Lifetime Achievement Award winner, she met her husband Jerry Donnelly at a track meet. And they've been together a long time, and they've been competitors in track and field for over 60 years. Now, another reason why master sports are important, in addition to fulfilling that particular definition of successful aging, is that they combat aging stereotypes. And we were talking before the presentation began, Vicki and I, how ageism is one of the few isms that is still sort of permitted to exist. And I think that anything that helps people shatter stereotypes is a good thing. And so I think one of the things that master sports do is to help people rethink the aging process just a little bit. Now, when you look at this picture, Gloria Krug, she's a 78-year-old retired school teacher from Pennsylvania. And unlike Kate Glenn, the grandmother with the long blonde hair, Gloria looks exactly like the world thinks a 78-year-old retired school teacher from Pennsylvania should look. She's got gray hair, she wears it in a bun. She fulfills the stereotype, except when she does this. Except when she throws herself through the air at an age when many people are afraid of falling. And this is where masters sports, I think, start to merge into the realm of metaphor. Because I've shown this picture to a lot of people, and one thing that several people have remarked to me is that their thought is, gee, if a 78-year-old woman can do this, maybe there are other things that older adults can do that society doesn't think they can do or should do. Completely divorced from the realm of sport. So anytime you've got a visual representation that helps people shift the paradigm a little bit with regard to how they think about older people, as Martha Stewart said, it's a good thing. And in terms of shattering stereotypes, this fellow's real legal name is O Santa Claus. I met him in Sydney, and he was in diving, swimming, track and field, doing everything. And when I asked him about his name, he said, well, he was born with the name Elvis, and he got so tired of all of the Elvis Presley jokes that he decided he would just go over the top and legally change his name to O Santa Claus. And certainly in terms of shattering stereotypes, this is something that we don't think Santa Claus could be able to do. The last area that I want to discuss with regard to why master sports are important is that they provide fitness role models. And now this is kind of a touchy area, because this is a very good book if anybody is interested. This summarizes a lot of the psychosocial research that has been done with regard to masters athletics. And one of the points that is brought up is that masters athletes provide very powerful role models for younger people, but not necessarily for people of the same age. And why is this true? I showed this picture to my 93-year-old mother, and her reaction was, damn fool, he's gonna hurt himself. And, you know, being a good investigative journalist, I probed that reaction a little bit, and there was some sadness there. My mother had been a baseball player when she was younger. She was an athlete. And so there was some jealousy. And sure enough, the research bears out that if you hold these people up as goals for people to achieve who are the same age as they, oftentimes you will get the reverse result. Because many older adults would feel like they can't even come close to what this person is doing, so they're not going to do anything at all. So we have to be very careful in terms of setting up these people as role models. As role models for younger athletes, fine. But for people of the same age, we have to think about it a little bit more carefully and not humiliate older adults who are not capable of doing this. So just something to think about. Now, sometimes it's very surprising for whom a master's athlete provides the role model function. Helen Searle, she's a two-time Olympian from Australia. She certainly is a role model for younger people in Australia. She makes speeches at universities. But to me, the most surprising person for whom she served as a role model was her own mother, Ruth Frith, who was also competing in Sydney at the age of 100. Ruth told me that she got tired when she was 76 of carrying her daughter's bags around to all of these competitions. And so she said, well, you know, if she can do it, I can do it. So at the age of 76, she started her athletic career, and within a few years was setting records all over the place. When I met her, she was primarily doing the throws, doing the hammer. And Ruth really had an opinion on everything. And she was the darling of the media. And one of these gentlemen was asking her, you know, to what do you attribute not only your athletic prowess, but your longevity? And Ruth said, she thought for a while and came back and said, I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I don't eat vegetables. So, go figure. Here she is. And Ruth died a couple of years ago at the age of 105. So, now, who are some of these masters athletes? Many of these people are my good friends, and I'm distilling their lives down to just a few words. And certainly we see masters athletes who've been doing this all their lives, who were former Olympians. And so Willie Banks, was a three-time Olympian. He's the past president of the 6,000 member Olympian Society. Ed Burke, he is also a three-time Olympian. His last Olympics was 1984 in Los Angeles, where he was the U.S. flag bearer. Richard Cochran won the bronze medal in the 1960 Rome Olympics in throwing the discus. Jim Barano, he placed 11th in the high jump at the 1976 Montreal Olympics. Those were the Olympics that Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner, won the decathlon. Shantae Lowe, she's a veteran of 4 Olympics, and she is of the age now where she can compete in what is called a submaster. She is, if you're 30 to 34, you can compete as a submaster. So she competes both in the open competitions and in masters competitions. And she is going for her 5th Olympics in 2020 in Japan. And just as we have Americans who are former Olympians, so too do we have people from other countries who are former Olympians. And here, their athletic careers sort of mirror the sweep of history. Raisa is a 2-time Olympian. Of course, when she competed, she represented the Soviet Union. Of course, there is no Soviet Union any longer, so as a master, she represents Russia. Sort of more dramatically, Yadwiga, she competed in the 1980 Moscow Olympics as a star of the Soviet Union. That's when Lithuania was a socialist republic of the USSR. Now that Lithuania is free, Jadwiga can compete wearing her own country's colors. Madeline Barnett, another veteran of the 1976 Montreal Olympics. She's from Australia. Her son medaled in the same event in the Olympics in Athens. And here she is with her tandem diving partner, Martin Lang. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this woman's name. She is a two-time Olympian and from Mongolia, so we have masters coming all the way from Mongolia. And I, for some reason, can pronounce this woman's name. Her name is Ivonne de Bablastigoitia, and she is from the Basque country, from Spain. And those of you who know your Spanish history know that the Basques were persecuted mercilessly under Franco. And so Yvonne immigrated to Mexico, and she represented Mexico in the 1948 London Olympics. And she has continued to dive ever since. And she's now in her late 80s, and when she dives, it looks like she's seeing the face of God. I mean, she is so incredibly gracious and great. She points her toes like a ballerina. Noel Morrow, she is a veteran of the 1936 Berlin Olympics, Hitler's Olympics, the Olympics that Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals at. Lubica from Italy, she was originally from Croatia. She also was a veteran of the 1936 Berlin Olympics, and when she died a couple of years ago at 102, she was the last surviving veteran of the Berlin Olympics still in competition. Now, even more impressive, I think, than the Olympians, because they've been doing it all their lives, are the late starters, people who have taken up sports later in their lives. I think they give hope to everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Ross was a veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, but he didn't start in track and field until he was 80. And then he usually competed in 15 or 16 different events. Mary Roman, she played basketball in high school, but when she got to college, she discovered there were no intercollegiate sports for women. Mary, of course, was pre-Title IX. Title IX was that measure passed in 1972, which provided equal funding for men's and women's sports. So we see a lot of masters women who did not have the opportunity to do any kind of athletics when they were younger women. So now they're making up for lost time, and Mary is one of them. She's a member of the USATF Hall of Fame. Kathy Bergen. Kathy had played a lot of tennis up until the time she was 60. She had done nothing in track and field, and very quickly became one of the fastest women in the world in her age group. And in her previous age group, she set the world record for the high jump for women 70 to 74. And she jumped a little over, she jumped about 4 feet, 3.5 inches. And she herself is a little over 5 feet tall. And I include this picture because she is doing the Fosbury flop. And the Fosbury flop is what all the young athletes do. The older athletes normally do a scissor kick or the Western roll or the straddle. But this picture shows you the faith that Kathy has in her 76-year-old body, because she's going to land on her neck or hit her upper back. And she set a world record doing it. Bob Lyda. Bob is, he was a collegiate track star, and then gave it up when he had started his career, and only got back into track and field when he was 60. And now Bob is the only American man to have been named World Masters Athlete of the Year twice. He won it last year and then a few years before that. So he did quite well starting late. Mary Bennett, she had been a swimmer in her youth. Never had done any diving, but she took her son to a swimming meet. She saw some older people diving over in the corner, and she went over and asked them what they were doing, and she learned all about organized masters diving. And within a few years, she was winning gold medals all over the U.S. Flo Myler was an avid skier. She's from Vermont. No track and field until she was 60. And now she does it all. She does the throws, the runs, the jumps. She has the distinction of being the oldest female pole vaulter in the world. Krista Bortignon, again a tennis player, but no track and field until she was 72. In 4 short years, she was named World Masters Athlete of the Year for women. She holds 15 world records in the age group 75 to 79. And her role model was Olga Vitelko from Canada. Now, a lot has been written on Olga. This book, What Makes Olga Run, by Bruce Gerson, really analyzed how at the age of 95, Olga could do what she could do. And basically the conclusion was that there was nothing particularly spectacular about her physically. What was spectacular about her was what was in here, was her attitude toward aging and what older people can do. Because I knew Olga very well, I photographed her for 10 years. I was asked by the American Psychological Association to review this book, and the guy got it on the head. I mean, Olga was all about trying and doing the best you absolutely can. When I photographed her here, this was at the World Championships in Budapest in 2014. And Olga, at the age of 95, was going places that no woman had ever gone. No woman in a competitive situation had ever done the high jump at her age or the long jump at her age. Now, Olga could have just shown up, done it once, set the world record, and gone home. But you are allotted a certain number of jumps. And Olga took all of her allotments, and each time she jumped, she did better. She told me that the first time she jumps, it's just to see how it feels. And then after that, it's to go for the records. And so it was interesting because in the long jump here, in one day, she set 6 world records because she just kept doing better and better and better. Now, Olga died about 2 months after I took these pictures of her. And I was telling some people earlier that I think that she went the way we all want to go, is that she squared the curve. Okay, there was no going downhill. She was winning gold medals. She won 10 gold medals, fell asleep one night, had an aneurysm, and was gone. And we miss her, but we have her example. And finally, Orville Rogers. He's 100. Orville is setting records for men that age. And Orville is this month's cover boy for Money Magazine. Orville is another example of a sound mind in sound body, because Orville was a pilot for Braniff Airlines. He trained pilots during World War II. And as a Braniff pilot, you know, he made a good salary, but he wasn't a 2%er. But he invested his money well, and he is being held up by Money Magazine as an example of someone who has been retired for 40 years, is using their retirement well by being an international track star, and who has $5 million in the bank. And in addition to all of those achievements, he drives a red Camaro. So Orville at age 100 is living the good life. And finally, there's a group of Masters athletes that I call the legends. They are people whose achievements transcend their own individual worth, and they have done things that have really propelled sports forward. John Deininger, he is the founder of the U.S. Masters Diving Association that was founded in 1974. He has been a diving coach for 40 years, and like the woman diver earlier, he also does stunt work in Hollywood. And here he is with his tandem diving partner, Felix Grossman from New York. Becky Sisley. Becky was the first women's athletic director for the University of Oregon. And University of Oregon is a big track and field school. And Becky is responsible for implementing Title IX at the University of Oregon. And as I said, that's what guaranteed equal funding for men's and women's sports. And the methodology that Becky used to implement this at the University of Oregon was then used throughout the country. So any young women who participated in sports in college have Becky Sisley to thank, because it is under her guidance that Title IX was instituted around the country. And most Masters athletes would acknowledge that Phil Raschker is the greatest Masters athlete in history. She holds more than 200 American and world records. And she was twice nominated for the Sullivan Award, which is given by the exclusive New York Athletic Club here in New York. That's like the Oscar for amateur athletics. And the last time she was nominated, Michael Phelps, the swimmer, won. But Phil is 38 years older than he is. And pole vaulting is a relatively new addition to track and field sports for women. And when it was first instituted, the three top pole vaulters in America were aged 18, 19, and 47. And finally, Irene O'Bara. Irene was World Masters Athlete of the Year. I seem to know a lot of those people, but I hang with the stars. And so she won 2 years ago at the age of 82, and she beat tens of thousands of people. Her athletic career goes back to the 50s and 60s. She raced against Wilma Rudolph, the great Olympian. And what's interesting to me about Irene is that at an age when other people are sort of giving up various events to compete in and focusing on one or two, Irene started out as a sprinter, and in the last few years has been adding events, like the high jump, like hurdling, like the long jump. And Irene now is sitting at home waiting to turn 85. On December 7th, she turns 85. This is the only endeavor where people want to get older, because when you get into that new age group is when you set new records. So she's waiting to set the records for the 85 age group. And here she is. She had once mentioned to me, I contributed the photographs to National Masters News. It's the magazine for the sport. And she had mentioned to me once that in 40 years of competing in Masters, she had never been on the cover of National Masters News. So I got together with the editor and the publisher, and we put her on the cover 7 times in one edition. And she deserved it. So to sort of wind up, what is the future of Masters sports? Well, it's a growing global movement, and we see a lot of people from Russia, the former Soviet countries, competing. And the reason is that during Soviet times, my Russian friends have told me that the only way you could get special privileges was by being a ballet star or an athlete. And so since many of these masters are from the Soviet era, they continue to compete. There's a little fly in the ointment, however, and that is that just as the younger Olympian athletes were banned because of the Soviet drug program, so too were the masters banned. And this is kind of controversial because I know quite a few of these people, and they are not being taken care of by their government like the younger athletes were taken care of. So I sincerely doubt whether they were involved in the doping scandal at all. But they've been banned for a couple of years. There's talk now of releasing that ban, and so again, we're going to see more athletes from Russia, and we, of course, the former Soviet socialist republics were not banned, so people from the Ukraine often compete. Estonia, from the satellite countries of the Soviet Union, Czech Republic. Germany is a big provider of athletes for master sports, just like for the Olympics. Japan, interestingly, up to World War II, was a major force in track and field. Not much after the war in track and field, they have other sport specialties, but since many of these people sort of were born around the war era, we see a lot of Japanese competitors at World Championships. This woman was happy because she just set a world record. This was from Malaga just about 6 weeks ago. In the 800, she shaved a lot of time off the existing record, so that record will be hers to keep for a long time. We also see people coming from other Asian countries, from India. Mankur, she's usually the oldest female competitor at any of these track and field meets. She's 101. And a lot of people coming out of China now. A few years ago, the World Masters Championships were held in Brazil, so more and more people are now coming out to compete in Masters from South America, from Chile, from Peru, from Argentina, and of course Brazil. What is the future of Masters sports? Well, as I said, it's growing, but it is inhibited by a lack of support in 3 specific areas. One, the public has no interest in it. We'll talk about that in a second. The second is no corporate support whatsoever. And the third is a lack of support from some segments of the medical field. And we'll talk about that a little bit. This is Rita Hanscom, another one of those World Masters Athletes of the Year. She won her award in 2009. Here she is pole vaulting in her own U.S. National Championships in Sacramento, 1 year after she was proclaimed the world's best female Masters athlete. And what's missing from this picture? There's nobody in the stands. Nobody comes out to see Masters athletes compete. Even the people who were former Olympians, who used to be able to fill stadiums with spectators, put a few years on them, and nobody's interested. Nobody comes out at all. And especially in the United States. In Malaga, we had a few spectators, much more than in the States, but in the States, nothing whatsoever. And the news media, being a journalist, I'm particularly sensitive to this, that the news media, if they come out at all, it is to photograph the oldest person and photographing them for about 10 seconds and then leaving. And then that article is not on the sports pages, it's on the human interest page, right next to firemen rescuing kittens out of trees. So again, a little bit of ageism at work there. I include this picture of Pascal from France, mainly to show what's on his leg. He is supported by the car manufacturer Renault. Similarly, German athletes are sponsored by Mercedes-Benz. But when Vincent Martin goes to Sydney, which is a long way away, to represent the United States, he not only has to buy his uniform, he has to pay his way. There is no corporate support whatsoever for Masters athletes in the US. And the other area, which is a little touchy one, as I'm sitting here in a medical facility, is that the medical profession is of 2 minds on Masters athletes. They like the notion of fitness, but they don't like people hurting themselves, which stands to reason. But if you're a younger athlete and you hurt yourself, You go to the doctor, you're patched up, and you go back out on the field. When you're an older athlete and you go to the doctor, normally the discussion goes something like, you do what on Saturday afternoons? You pole vault? Well, just stop. Just stop and you'll be absolutely fine. And again, this is where Masters verges on to metaphor. Because anytime you tell an older person to stop doing something that gives them a sense of identity, you're really treading on some thin ice. And so while I am not advocating that doctors tell people to stop doing things, all I'm asking for is a little nuance here, is a little bit of consideration for what that